Hey everyone, Pastor Nathan here. On this, the last day of 2020, we're starting to pray Psalm 119. This is the longest psalm in the Bible, but it's not just one continuous psalm, it's actually multiple different psalms, all lumped kind of under one chapter heading, if you will. This is a unique psalm in that it is divided up by the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. So it's an acrostic, which means that the beginning word of each of the psalms starts with whatever letter of the acrostic they're on. So, for example, the first portion of the psalm starts with Aleph. And so the first word of this first portion of the psalm begins with the letter Aleph. The second section begins with the letter Beth. The third section begins with the letter Gimel, and so forth and so on. That's just an interesting bit of trivia there. The bigger thing with this section, though, is that Psalm 119 sort of attacks Psalms a little bit differently, attacks this conversation with God differently than the rest of the Psalms. The rest of the Psalms tend to focus on God's creative, redemptive, and ruling acts in the world. Psalm 119 focuses far more on the servant's devotion to God's word. So many of the sections of this psalm will focus on God's corrective discipline, the errant ways of the human heart, and potential suffering at the hands of those who do not believe in God or trust his word. So this is potentially a psalm that was written post-exile, which means this is written by somebody who's well aware and familiar with what he's writing about. So the author is very aware of being persecuted for the sake of the word and being tempted to live in a way that does not reflect the word. These psalms, and we're talking about them, using them as handholds in order to enter prayer, are a very different beast from the entrance into prayer other psalms have provided up to this point. These are much more personal and self-focused. So in one way, it kind of makes it easier to use these as entrance into prayer, and another way, it makes it harder. The other thing that we have to talk about with these psalms, as we're using them as an entrance into prayer, is this. The author uses multiple words for God's word in this section. He uses words like commands, decrees, precepts, laws, word, and way. And all of those words are pointing to basically the same thing. What God has said, the author wishes to live by. God's will is what the author wants his will to be. All that being said, let's briefly talk about verses 17 through 24. This portion of Psalm 119, for me at least, as I'm looking at this, gives kind of two unique places to enter into prayer. Verse 18 talks about opening our eyes to see wonderful things in your law or in your word or what you have revealed about yourself. And verse 17, God is the cause of the servant's continued life. So we could use either of those handholds to get us into prayer fairly easily, at least as I'm seeing it. I mean, we're asking God to reveal God in his conversation with us, the incredible things that he has in his word for us. We're asking God with this handhold in order to open our eyes to see what incredible things is he saying, has he said, and will he continue to reveal to us as we're following his son Jesus Christ. The gospel is one of those things, but it can also be much more than the gospel. The other thing is that the servant acknowledges that God is the cause of the servant's continued life. It is the Lord's goodness that allows him to live. And if we're honest, regardless of the medical practices in the United States, regardless of our eating healthily or well, the truth of the matter is that it's the Lord's will that allows us to live and continue to live and gives us all the good things that we have. Either way, we can use those as handholds for us to enter into prayer, enter into a conversation with the Lord. Hope you'll have a great rest of the day, and we'll talk with you soon. Take care.